They made their move. Now it's mine.
The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers and clattered against the concrete floor of my garage, echoing like a thunderclap in the sudden silence. Through the thin walls separating my workshop from our kitchen, I could hear my 17-year-old daughter Ellie's voice, sharp and cutting as a blade. God, Mom, I can't believe you've put up with him for so long. He's such a loser. At least now you're finally getting what you deserve. I froze beneath the hood of Mrs. Patterson's ancient Buick, my hands still wrapped around the alternator I'd been wrestling with for the past hour. The smell of motor oil and rust filled my nostrils, but it couldn't mask the bitter taste that suddenly flooded my mouth. My name is Jake Morrison, and I've been fixing cars in this Rust Belt suburb of Milltown for 22 years. I married my wife Stephanie when we were both young and stupid, back when she thought my calloused hands and blue-collar swagger were charming instead of embarrassing. Now she's a paralegal at Henderson & Associates, the flashiest law firm in our little corner of nowhere, and I'm still the guy who gets his fingernails dirty for a living. Honey, keep your voice down. Stephanie's voice drifted through the wall, but there was no real concern in it. Just the practiced caution of someone who's gotten used to living a double life. I wiped my hands on my coveralls and crept closer to the door connecting the garage to the house. The conversation was getting interesting, and after 18 years of marriage, I'd learned that the most important things were always said when people thought I couldn't hear them.
Why? He's probably too busy playing with his toys to notice anything anyway.
Ellie laughed, and the sound was like fingernails on a chalkboard.
Besides, everyone at school already knows about you and Brad.
Jenny's mom saw you two at that hotel bar downtown last Friday. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. Bradley Hoffman, real estate broker extraordinaire with his perfectly white teeth and his BMW that he brought to my shop exactly once before deciding I wasn't upscale enough for his precious German engineering. Brad, who my wife claimed was just a friend from her new gym membership. Brad, who apparently had been doing a lot more than spotting her during her Friday night yoga sessions.
Jenny's mother needs to mind her own business,
Stephanie said, but I could hear the worry creeping into her voice now.
And you need to be more careful about what you say. Your father isn't stupid, even if he acts like it sometimes.
Thanks for the vote of confidence, sweetheart. I backed away from the door and returned to the Buick, but my hands were shaking now, and the simple task of replacing an alternator suddenly felt impossible. My mind was racing, connecting dots I'd been too blind or too trusting to see before. The late nights at the office that had become more frequent over the past 6 months. The new clothes she'd been buying, expensive stuff that didn't match our budget or her usual conservative style. The way she'd started going to the gym religiously every Friday evening, always coming home with her hair perfectly styled and her makeup fresh, like she'd spent more time in front of a mirror than on a treadmill. And the phone calls. God, the phone calls that always seemed to end abruptly whenever I walked into the room. I finished the alternator replacement on autopilot, my hands working from muscle memory while my brain churned through the implications of what I'd just heard. By the time I heard Stephanie's car pull out of the driveway, probably heading to another client meeting, I had made my decision. If my wife was cheating on me, I was going to find out. And if she thought I was too stupid to notice, well, she was about to learn just how wrong she could be. 3 days later, I was sitting in my friend Gordy's boxing gym, nursing a beer and watching him work the heavy bag like it owed him money. Gordy McCready had been my best friend since high school, back when he was Golden Gloves champion, and I was the kid who kept his motorcycle running. Now he owned this rundown gym on the wrong side of town, training wannabe tough guys, and has been fighters who still believed they had one more shot at glory. So, let me get this straight, Gordy said between combinations, his breath coming in short puffs. Your wife's been acting weird, your daughter thinks you're a moron, and you want to play private detective. I don't want to play anything, I said, taking a long pull from my bottle. I want to know the truth. Gordy stopped hitting the bag and turned to face me. He was pushing 50, same as me, but he still looked like he could go 10 rounds with guys half his age. His face was scarred from too many fights, but his eyes were sharp and intelligent. Jake, you sure you want to open this can of worms? Sometimes ignorance really is bliss. Too late for that, I said. I already heard enough to know something's going on. Now I need to know how bad it is. He nodded slowly, understanding. What do you need? Help with some surveillance equipment. Nothing fancy, just a small camera I can hide in a hotel room. Gordy's eyebrows shot up. Jesus, Jake, you're really going all in, aren't you? She thinks I'm too stupid to figure it out, I said, and I could hear the anger creeping into my voice. Let's see how smart she really is. The next Friday evening, I was parked across the street from the Milltown Motor Lodge, a seedy little place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask too many questions. I'd spent the afternoon setting up a tiny wireless camera in room 237, the same room where Stephanie had been meeting her lover, according to the credit card statements I'd found hidden in her jewelry box. At 7:30 p.m., right on schedule, Stephanie's silver Honda pulled into the parking lot. She sat in the car for a few minutes, checking her makeup in the rearview mirror, before walking to room 237 with the confident stride of someone who'd made this trip many times before. 15 minutes later, Brad's BMW pulled up next to her car. I watched through binoculars as he got out, smoothed his perfectly styled hair, and knocked on the door. When it opened, I saw my wife's silhouette framed in the doorway, backlit by the cheap motel lighting. She was wearing a red dress I'd never seen before, something that hugged her curves and showed more skin than she'd shown me in years. They kissed, long and passionate, right there in the doorway where anyone could see them. Then the door closed and I was left sitting in my truck, watching the drawn curtains and feeling like someone had reached into my chest and ripped out my heart. But I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number for Milltown Flowers, a local delivery service that stayed open late to cater to guilty husbands and last-minute romantics. "Hi, I'd like to send champagne and chocolates to room 237 at the Motor Lodge," I said, keeping my voice steady. "And I'd like to include a card." "Sure thing. What would you like the card to say?" I smiled, and it probably wasn't a pleasant expression. "Smile, you're live on camera." 20 minutes later, I watched the delivery boy knock on the door. I saw Brad answer, confusion clear on his face, even from across the street. Then I saw him read the card, and his expression changed to something between panic and rage. The door slammed shut, and through my binoculars, I could see the shadows moving frantically behind the curtains. They were probably searching for the camera, but I'd hidden it well, built into what looked like a smoke detector that matched the others in the room. I started my truck and drove home, whistling softly to myself. Phase 1 was complete. Now came the fun part. At 9:45 p.m., I sent a text message to our family group chat: me, Stephanie, Ellie, and Stephanie's parents. The message contained a simple link and the words, "Thought you might find this interesting." Then I sat back and waited for my phone to explode. The first call came from Stephanie's mother at 9:47 p.m. I let it go to voicemail. The second call came from Ellie at 9:48. I let that one go too. By 10:15, I had 17 missed calls and 43 text messages, ranging from confused to angry to absolutely furious. Stephanie didn't come home that night or the next morning. She finally walked through our front door at 2:30 p.m. on Saturday, looking like she'd aged 5 years in the past 18 hours. Her perfectly styled hair was a mess, her makeup was smeared, and her red dress was wrinkled beyond repair. "We need to talk," she said, her voice hoarse. "Do we?" I was sitting at the kitchen table, calmly eating a sandwich and reading the newspaper like it was any other Saturday afternoon. "Seems like everything's pretty clear to me. Jake, please, let me explain." I looked up at her then, really looked at her, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Explain what, Steph? Explain how you've been screwing your gym buddy in a cheap motel for the past 6 months? Explain how you've been lying to my face every Friday night? Or maybe you want to explain how you and our daughter have been laughing at what a pathetic loser I am behind my back." She flinched like I'd slapped her. "You don't understand. Brad and I, we never meant for this to happen. It just—" "Save it," I interrupted. "I've heard this speech in a dozen movies. It just happened. It didn't mean anything. I never wanted to hurt you. Did I miss any of the classics?" Tears started rolling down her cheeks, but I felt nothing. The man who would have comforted her, who would have tried to work things out, who would have blamed himself for not being good enough, that man had died somewhere between hearing my daughter call me a loser and watching my wife kiss another man in a motel doorway. "What do you want?" she asked finally. "I want a divorce," I said simply. "I want you out of my house, and I want to make sure everyone in this pathetic little town knows exactly what kind of woman you really are." Her tears stopped abruptly, and I saw something cold and calculating flicker in her eyes. "You think you can destroy me? You think anyone cares what some small-town mechanic has to say about anything?" "We'll see," I said. She straightened up, and suddenly she looked more like the woman who'd been playing me for a fool all these months. "You have no idea who you're messing with, Jake.
I'm not some helpless housewife you can push around. I have friends, important friends. Like Brad? Like Tina Martinez. She's a lawyer and she's very good at her job. By the time she's done with you, you'll be lucky to keep this house, let alone your precious garage. I'd heard of Tina Martinez. She was a hotshot attorney who'd moved to Milltown about 5 years ago, supposedly from Chicago. She specialized in divorce cases and had a reputation for being ruthless. She was also, apparently, one of Stephanie's new friends from her professional networking group. "Bring it on," I said. Stephanie smiled, and it wasn't pleasant. "You always were too stupid to know when you were beaten." After she left, I sat in my kitchen and thought about what she'd said. Tina Martinez. The name was familiar for some reason, but I couldn't quite place why. It would come to me eventually. In the meantime, I had work to do. If Stephanie wanted to play hardball, I was more than happy to oblige. But she was about to learn that underestimating your opponent is the fastest way to lose a war. I picked up my phone and called Gordy. "Remember how you said I might not want to open this can of worms?" "Yeah?" "Well, it's open now, and I'm going to need your help turning it into a tool." Monday morning brought divorce papers served by a courier who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I signed for them with a smile that made the poor kid take a step backward. The papers were thorough. I had to give Tina Martinez credit for that. Stephanie was asking for half of everything: the house, the garage, my tools, even my truck. She was also claiming emotional distress and requesting alimony based on her reduced earning capacity due to the trauma of having her privacy violated. The woman had balls, I'd give her that. I drove to Henderson and Associates to deliver my response. The law office was in the nicest building in downtown Milltown, all glass and steel, trying to look important in a town that hadn't seen importance since the steel mill closed in 1987. The receptionist was a young woman with perfect teeth and a practiced smile. "I'm sorry, Mr. Morrison, but Mrs. Martinez is in court today. Would you like to leave a message?" "Just give her this," I said, handing over an envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 5 words. "Game on. Your move, counselor." I was halfway back to my truck when I heard someone calling my name. I turned to see Tom Bradley, my former best customer, and the guy who'd recommended my services to half the town over the years. Tom owned Bradley Construction, and his fleet of work trucks had kept my garage busy for the better part of a decade. "Jake, hey, glad I caught you," Tom said, but his expression didn't match his words. He looked uncomfortable, like a man about to deliver bad news. "What's up, Tom? Listen, I heard about what's going on with you and Stephanie, and I just wanted to say I'm sorry, man. Divorce is tough." "Thanks," I said, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "The thing is, Jake, some of my guys have been talking, and with all this drama and everything, they're worried about bringing their vehicles to someone who might be, distracted." I stared at him. "Are you firing me, Tom? It's not personal, Jake. It's just business. Maybe after things settle down." "After things settle down," I repeated. "Right." Tom had the decency to look ashamed. "I'm sorry, Jake, I really am." "No, you're not," I said. "You're scared. Scared that being associated with me might hurt your precious reputation. Well, here's some free advice, Tom. When you're afraid of your own shadow, you end up living in the dark." I climbed into my truck and drove away, leaving Tom standing in the parking lot looking like he'd been gut-punched. But I wasn't done with him, not by a long shot. The rest of the week brought more of the same. 3 more customers canceled their service contracts. The guys at Murphy's Tavern, where I'd been drinking Friday night beers for 15 years, suddenly found reasons to avoid my table. Even Mrs. Hanks, my 70-year-old neighbor who'd been bringing me homemade cookies every Christmas since I moved to the neighborhood, crossed the street when she saw me working in my yard. By Friday evening, I was sitting alone in my garage, surrounded by half-finished repair jobs and empty beer bottles, when Gordy showed up with a 6-pack and a grim expression. "Heard you lost the Bradley account," he said, settling into the folding chair I kept for visitors. "Among others," I said. "Funny how fast 20 years of friendship disappears when things get messy." "People are sheep, Jake. They follow the herd." "Yeah, well, maybe it's time someone reminded them what happens when the sheep piss off the wolf." Gordy raised an eyebrow. "That doesn't sound like the Jake Morrison I know." "The Jake Morrison you knew was a sucker," I said. "He believed in playing fair, being honest, treating people with respect. Look where it got him. So what are you going to do?" I smiled, and this time I didn't care if it was pleasant or not. "I'm going to give this town exactly what it wants. They want a villain? They're going to get one. Jake. They think I'm the bad guy for exposing my cheating wife. They think I'm the problem because I won't quietly disappear and let everyone pretend nothing happened. Fine. If I'm going to be cast as the villain in this little drama, I might as well play the part properly. I stood up and walked to my workbench, where I'd been sketching out plans for the past 3 days. Plans that would make my wife and her lover wish they'd never heard the name Jake Morrison. "What's that?" Gordy asked, looking over my shoulder. "That," I said, "is how you turn a mechanic into a monster." The first phase of my plan went into effect the following Monday morning. I'd spent the weekend gathering intelligence, and what I'd discovered was better than I'd hoped. Brad Hoffman, it turned out, was not the successful real estate mogul he pretended to be. His agency was struggling, he was behind on his BMW payments, and his biggest client was a development company that cared very much about their agents, maintaining a family-friendly public image. I started with his car, the beautiful black BMW that he was so proud of, parked every morning in the lot behind his office building. It only took me 10 minutes with a can of spray paint to transform it from a symbol of success into a rolling billboard advertising his moral flexibility. Cheater in bright red letters across the hood, homewrecker on the driver's side door, and my personal favorite, ask me about my married girlfriend across the rear windshield. I was long gone by the time Brad discovered his automotive makeover, but Mrs. Hanks, who'd apparently decided I was worth talking to again, was happy to fill me in on the details. According to her, Brad's screaming could be heard 3 blocks away. Phase 2 involved a little creative plumbing. Brad lived in Milltown Gardens, a fancy apartment complex that catered to young professionals who wanted to feel important. The building had a central mail system, which made it easy for me to deliver a special package to every resident. The package contained photocopies of Brad's credit card statements, the ones showing regular charges at the motor lodge, along with a friendly note explaining that their neighbor in 4B liked to spend his evenings with other men's wives. I included my wife's name and workplace information just to be thorough. By Wednesday, Brad's landlord had received enough complaints to start eviction proceedings, but I was just getting started. Thursday morning, I paid a visit to Pinnacle Development, Brad's biggest client. I didn't go as Jake Morrison, angry husband. I went as Jake Morrison, concerned citizen, with a manila envelope full of documentation about their employees' extracurricular activities. "Mr. Henderson," I said to the company president, "I thought you should know that one of your agents has been engaging in behavior that might reflect poorly on your company's reputation." Richard Henderson was a thin, nervous man who'd built his business on the principle that scandal was bad for sales. He looked through my documentation with growing alarm. "This is very disturbing, Mr. Morrison. Very disturbing indeed." "I thought you should know," I said. "A company like yours with such high standards wouldn't want to be associated with this kind of behavior." By Thursday afternoon, Brad Hoffman was unemployed. Friday brought the piece de resistance. I'd saved the best for last. I discovered that Brad had been using a company credit card for his hotel visits, claiming them as client entertainment expenses. This wasn't just adultery, it was fraud, and fraud was something the police took very seriously. I didn't call the cops directly, that would have been too obvious. Instead, I made an anonymous tip to the state attorney's office, complete with copies of the credit card statements and hotel receipts. Let them draw their own conclusions. By Friday evening, Brad Hoffman's life was in ruins. No job, no apartment, no car worth driving, and a pending investigation for credit card fraud. All in the span of 5 days. But I wasn't done yet, not even close. Saturday morning, I got a phone call from Tina Martinez. "Mr. Morrison, I think we need to meet." "Do we?" "My client is prepared to be reasonable about the divorce settlement if you're willing to call off your harassment campaign against Mr. Hoffman," I laughed. "Harassment? I haven't harassed anyone. I've simply made sure that the truth about Mr. Hoffman's character became public knowledge." "You've destroyed his life." "He destroyed mine first. I'm just returning the favor." There was a long pause. "You don't know who you're dealing with, Mr. Morrison." "Funny," I said. "I was just thinking the same thing about you." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and thought about that conversation. There had been something in Tina Martinez's voice, something personal. This wasn't just about representing a client. This was personal for her. That's when it hit me. Tina Martinez. I knew that name because it wasn't always Martinez. 5 years ago, when she'd first moved to Milltown, it had been Tina Kowalski, and 15 years before that, Tina Kowalski had been my business partner in a garage we'd owned together on the south side of town, the garage that had failed because she'd been skimming money from the business account to fund her law school education, the garage that had cost me my life savings when I'd been forced to buy her out to avoid bankruptcy, the garage that had taught me never to trust a partner again. Tina Martinez hadn't come to Milltown by accident. She'd come here for revenge, and my cheating wife had just given her the perfect opportunity to get it. I smiled. This was getting interesting. The final confrontation came at the annual Milltown Community Block Party, a quaint little tradition where the whole town gathered in Riverside Park to pretend we were all one big, happy family. It was the perfect venue for what I had planned. Public, well-attended, and equipped with a sound system that could reach every corner of the park. I arrived early, dressed in my best jeans and a clean shirt, carrying a folding chair and a cooler full of beer like any other resident ready to enjoy a Saturday afternoon in the sun. What I didn't advertise was the manila folder tucked under my chair, full of documentation that would make this a block party to remember. Stephanie arrived an hour later with Tina Martinez, both of them dressed like they were attending a country club function instead of a neighborhood barbecue. They found a spot near the bandstand and set up their own chairs, clearly positioning themselves to make some kind of statement. Brad showed up 20 minutes after that, looking like a man who'd been through heck and hadn't quite made it out the other side. His BMW was in the shop getting repainted, so he was driving a beat-up rental car that probably cost him more per day than he was making now that he was unemployed. He looked around nervously before joining Stephanie and Tina, clearly uncomfortable with the public setting. The first few hours passed peacefully enough. There were the usual activities, a softball game, face painting for the kids, a dunking booth manned by volunteers from the fire department. I played my part, chatting with neighbors, buying raffle tickets, acting like a man who was trying to move on with his life after a difficult divorce. But I was watching, always watching, and waiting for my moment. It came at 4:30 during the community announcements portion of the program. Mayor Davidson was at the microphone thanking various sponsors and volunteers when I stood up and started walking toward the bandstand. "Excuse me, Mayor Davidson," I called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'd like to say a few words, if that's all right." Davidson looked confused but handed over the microphone. The crowd settled into expectant silence, probably thinking I was going to make some kind of public apology or plea for sympathy. They were wrong. "Folks, I want to thank you all for coming out today," I began, my voice carrying clearly across the park. "It's great to see our community coming together like this. It reminds me why I've been proud to call Milltown home for the past 20 years. I could see Stephanie and Tina exchanging worried glances. Brad was looking around like he wanted to run. "Now, I know there's been some talk lately about my personal situation," I continued. "Some of you have heard that my wife and I are getting divorced. That's true. What you might not know is why." "Jake, don't do this," Stephanie called out, but I ignored her. "You see, I discovered that my wife has been having an affair with Brad Hoffman over there." I pointed directly at Brad, who turned red and started to stand up. "They've been meeting at the Motor Lodge every Friday night for the past 6 months, using company credit cards to pay for their little romantic getaways." The crowd was dead silent now, hanging on every word. "But that's not the interesting part," I said. "The interesting part is what happened when I found out. Instead of apologizing, instead of trying to work things out, my wife decided to try to destroy me. She hired a lawyer, Tina Martinez, who's sitting right over there, to take everything I own and leave me with nothing." Tina was on her feet now, shouting something about slander, but I kept talking. "What makes this really fascinating is that Miss Martinez isn't just any lawyer. She's someone with a personal grudge against me. Someone who's been waiting 15 years to get revenge for a business deal that went bad. Someone who saw my wife's infidelity as the perfect opportunity to finish what she started all those years ago." I reached into my folder and pulled out a stack of papers. "I've got documentation here that shows Miss Martinez has been planning this for months. Bank records, email communications, even a recording of her telling my wife exactly how to hide assets during the divorce proceedings. That last part was a lie, but it sounded good, and the crowd was eating it up. But here's the best part," I said, grinning now. "While Miss Martinez was busy plotting my destruction, she made one little mistake. She started sleeping with her client's boyfriend." The gasp from the crowd was audible. Stephanie went white as a sheet. Brad looked like he was going to be sick. And Tina Martinez looked like she wanted to commit homicide. "That's right, folks. The lawyer who's supposed to be protecting my wife's interests has been having her own affair with Brad Hoffman. I've got hotel receipts, credit card statements, even some lovely photographs that a private investigator took last Tuesday afternoon. I held up a manila envelope. Anyone want to see them? You bastard, Tina screamed, lunging toward the bandstand. You lying bastard! But Gordy was there to intercept her, his big hands gentle but firm as he guided her away from the microphone. Now I know what some of you are thinking, I continued. You're thinking this is all very unseemly, airing dirty laundry in public like this. And you're right, it is unseemly. But you know what's more unseemly? A whole town turning their back on a man because his wife decided to cheat on him. Friends abandoning him because scandal makes them uncomfortable. People who've known him for 20 years suddenly deciding he's not worth their time. I looked directly at Tom Bradley, who was standing near the back of the crowd looking like he wanted to disappear. So here's what's going to happen, I said. I'm going to give this town exactly what it deserves. You wanted drama? You've got it. You wanted to choose sides? Well, now you know what all the sides really look like. I handed the microphone back to Mayor Davidson and walked off the bandstand, leaving chaos in my wake. Stephanie was crying. Brad was arguing with someone from the crowd who was calling him names, and Tina Martinez was screaming at Gordy to let her go. I made it halfway to my truck before Tom Bradley caught up with me. Jake, wait, he called out. I owe you an apology. I turned to face him. Do you? I was wrong to cancel our contract. I let fear make my decisions for me. Yes, you did. I'd like to make it right. All of us would. I looked past him and saw a small group of my former customers and friends approaching, all of them wearing expressions of shame and regret. Would you? I asked. We were wrong, Jake. We should have stood by you. I nodded slowly. Yes, you should have, but you didn't. And that tells me everything I need to know about what your friendship was really worth. Jake, please! I'm not interested in fair weather friends, Tom. I'm not interested in people who only support me when it's convenient for them. You made your choice when things got difficult. Now I'm making mine. I climbed into my truck and drove away, leaving them standing in the parking lot. In my rearview mirror, I could see the crowd still gathered around the bandstand, probably discussing what they'd just witnessed for years to come. When I got home, I found Ellie sitting on my front porch, her eyes red from crying. Dad, she said as I walked up the steps. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry for everything I said. I sat down next to her. Are you sorry because you meant it or because you got caught? She was quiet for a long moment. Both, I guess. I was angry at you for embarrassing Mom, but I didn't know about the other stuff. About the lawyer and the money and everything. Your mother made her choices, Ellie. They weren't my fault and they weren't yours. Can I come live with you? I don't want to stay with Mom anymore. I put my arm around her shoulders. We'll figure it out. That night, I sat in my garage with a beer and thought about what had happened. I'd won, in a way. My enemies were destroyed, my reputation was restored, and my daughter was home where she belonged. But victory had come at a price. I'd become exactly what Stephanie had called me. A villain. Someone who fought dirty, who hit below the belt, who didn't care about collateral damage, as long as he got his revenge. The funny thing was, I was okay with that. Sometimes being the villain is the only way to win. Sometimes you have to be willing to do what the heroes won't do. Sometimes you have to embrace the darkness to find your way back to the light. I raised my beer in a mock toast to my absent enemies. Thanks for the education, I said to the empty garage. It's been enlightening. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. Stephanie got nothing. The prenup I'd insisted on 20 years ago turned out to be ironclad, and her adultery voided most of her claims anyway. She moved to another state with what was left of her dignity in her savings account. Brad Hoffman pleaded guilty to credit card fraud and got 2 years probation and a hefty fine. And Tina Martinez was disbarred after the State Bar Association investigated her conduct during our case. I kept the house, the garage, and my daughter. Tom Bradley and the others came crawling back, offering apologies and new contracts. But I turned them all down. I'd learned that I didn't need friends who only stood by me when it was convenient. I had Gordy, I had Ellie, and I had the satisfaction of knowing that I'd beaten them all at their own game. People in town still cross the street when they see me coming, but it's not out of pity anymore. It's out of respect, and maybe a little fear. They know now that Jake Morrison isn't someone you want to cross.
They know that the quiet mechanic who fixes their cars and minds his own business is capable of things they never imagined, and that's fine with me. Funny thing about being the villain, sometimes it's the only way to win.